In 1993, 13-year-old Thaddeus Jimenez, better known as TJ to fellow members of the Simon City Royals gang, was arrested and later wrongfully convicted for the murder of 19-year-old Eric Morrow. He was one of the youngest people in Illinois ever charged as an adult, and was sentenced to 50 years in prison. He was released 16 years later in 2009, and in 2012, Jimenez won a $25 million settlement from the city of Chicago. In 2014, he paid a faction of traveling vice lords to flip gangs and join his crew. They called themselves No Love, Money Gang. Jimenez called himself Batman and Bruce Wayne on social media, but his attorney, Stephen Greenberg, wrote in court documents that his settlement was squandered on status-enhancing material goods and on reviving the Simon City Royals, the all-but-defunct gang of his childhood, where Thaddeus provided financial assistance to others on the street who joined him. He reimagined it on a clinically grandiose scale, a kind of Camelot of loyal comrades in arms, with himself as its head, not a broken, shaken man unable to function in the real world, but in this more familiar realm, a leader, a king, in control, powerful, invulnerable. Jimenez's early childhood was spent on the Northwest Side, the Royals' base for decades. His uncles were Simon City Royals, and he views the gang as his family. In the 1950s and 60s, the Royals were known for their white supremacist ideology. In 1971, the white gangs on the streets of Chicago felt they were the victims against the much larger Hispanic and black gangs in their neighborhoods. Hispanic migration was a major issue, especially on the north side and northwest sides, where old, white neighborhoods were changing. Latin kings were becoming a real powerhouse, and such gangs as Latin Eagles, Imperial Gangsters, Latin Disciples and Spanish Cobras were beginning to rapidly recruit. It was then time for a major truce among white gangs called the White Power Organization. This truce effectively stopped wars between white gangs and helped several white gangs grow much larger. One of those gangs was the Simon City Royals. In 1975, a black disciple named Michael Mauldin, aka Motto, currently serving a life sentence for murder, moved to the area into Simon City Royal territory, and began hanging out with Royals, maniac drifters, and insane unknowns, a mostly Hispanic gang, and, before you knew it, there was a circle of friends that had been former rivals, hanging out regularly. This also marks the first time that the Simon City Royals on the Northwest Side started trading guns and favors with the Black Gangster Disciple Nation. Around this time, some Hispanics had already joined the Simon City Royals to gangbang against their rivals, the Latin Kings, and a black guy living in their territory on Paulina and Cornelia, nicknamed Buckwheat, decided to join them and became the first African American member of the Simon City Royals. Yes, you heard me correctly. This goofy hung around a bunch of white guys who called him Buckwheat. In April of 1978, Larry Hoover organized a work stoppage strike in Stateville Prison. This was a protest against foul treatment of prisoners and feeding prisoners rotten food. All gangs were brought together for this protest, which led to better food and treatment for the prisoners. In 1979, all of the various street gangs in prison allied themselves under either the Folks Nation or People's Nation. The main Simon City Royal, who was responsible for bringing his gang and the Black Gangster Disciples together, was Beeper. As a result, Mike and Patrick Dayton started a new branch of Royals at Albany and School in 1979. In the Avondale neighborhood, known as the Insane Royals. This group of Royals did not honor folk nation concepts and had a white power stance. In the summer of 1980, the Simon City Royals and Black Gangster Disciples attempted to increase their alliance and their power in the city by calling for a meeting. They wanted to take over the drug and weapons trade to help each other fuel their individual gang wars. 91 members of both gangs met on a Saturday afternoon in a warehouse located at 642 East 47th Street on the city's south side. Concerned residents called the police, who raided the meeting. This meeting was in wake of the officialization of the Folk Alliance in 1980. In 1982, Agim Hatza took control of the Simon City Royals. By the late 1980s, the gang began having issues with key incarcerations of older, higher-ranking members, including their leader, Agim Hatza, who was arrested in a drug raid and spent a short time in jail. The gradual loss of leadership drastically shrunk the organization, and resulted in a loss of territory over the course of the late 1980s, up to the mid-1990s. White flight, and gentrification, was growing in the city in the 1990s, which also hurt the Royals as members could no longer afford to live in these now pricey neighborhoods. Yuppies were taking over. This was the state of the gang that initiated an 11-year-old, Thaddeus, T.J. Jimenez, or as he would later fashion himself, young Master Bruce Wayne, into a Pee-wee Simon City Royal. And young Master Wayne was only 13, still in elementary school, when he was arrested for murder in 1993. By the time of the murder bust at age 13, he'd already been arrested 22 times. It was his friend, Larry Tueffel, who fingered him to the police as the killer. On the day of the shooting, Jimenez was standing on a corner with his homies from the Simon City Royals when someone busted shots. Based on his friend's testimony, Jimenez was later convicted of fatally shooting Eric Morrow, a 19-year-old gang rival, on the north side. While being held pending trial, in Morrow's killing, Jimenez wrote letters to his girlfriend saying he was going to have his former friend, Tueffel, killed for snitching on him, according to prosecutors. Young Master Wayne also wrote poetry. In one poem, he titled Devilish, he wrote, "I am young and foolish, with so little heart. My body is confused and my mind is dark." Flashing that dark side in court, he tried to punch a Cook County prosecutor after he was sentenced to 50 years in prison for murder. In the very early 1990s, Agim Hatza had mostly avoided long jail sentences, and quietly slipped into retirement, leaving leadership to Frank Fats Fender. In 1995, Frank Fender stepped down from leadership, and it was said that Brian Mouse E. Nelson took over leadership of the whole nation. However, the real truth is, Mouse E. was only running Stateville operations during the time Jimenez was locked up, and Mouse E. was later transferred to Tam's Supermax facility, where he was held in solitary confinement. Before that, Mouse E. acted as a part of Larry Hoover's security team, carrying 2 shanks. One for him, and one for Larry Hoover, if things popped off. For his part, Jimenez's rank within the gang rose with his age, where he was the supervisor of his adult housing unit. Young Master Wayne had grown into the Batman. In 2005, Northwestern University's Center on Wrongful Convictions agreed to review his case. The center had a private investigator interview Tueffel, who recanted his trial testimony that Jimenez was the killer, and implicated Juan Carlos Torres, an older, teenage friend of Jimenez. As a result, the state's attorney's office moved to vacate Jimenez's murder conviction in 2009, and charged Torres with Morrow's killing. When he was freed, Jimenez's lawyers said he appeared to be the youngest person in U.S. history to be wrongfully convicted of a crime, and later exonerated. He was awarded $25 million by a jury in 2012. He sued the city of Chicago and Detective Jerome Bogutsky for framing Jimenez for murder. The following year, Torres went to trial for first-degree murder in Morrow's death. Cook County Circuit Judge Thomas Gaynor Jr. found that key witnesses against Torres had lied, including Tueffel, who according to court records, was suffering from paranoid schizophrenia and drug addiction. "I don't believe a word that he said when he testified here," Gaynor said, according to a transcript of the 2013 trial. Gaynor also found other evidence against Torres unreliable, including an audio recording by Jimenez's father, purported to be of Torres confessing. Judge Gaynor found Torres not guilty. In 2012, after his lawyers got half of that $25 million settlement, Jimenez, oops, I meant Batman, still had plenty of money to spend on efforts to revive the mostly white and Hispanic Simon City Royals gang on the northwest side. Jimenez's mother is Polish-American, and his father is Hispanic. Jimenez's idea to expand his gang kingdom, his Gotham City, to the west side of Chicago, grew out of a friendship forged in the Cook County Jail after he was charged with drug possession in 2012, according to a law enforcement source. The source says, a drug dealer he met in jail was part of the traveling vice lords from the 700 block of North Trumbull, and that led Jimenez to Dantrell Williams, another traveling vice lord from that area. Williams got an R tattooed on his neck and became one of the original leaders of Batman's No Love, Money gang. The first time that Batman was documented hanging out with his West Side crew was on May 22, 2014, in the 4100 block of West Chicago. A police report shows Jimenez was stopped by officers for a traffic violation in his green Humvee, riding with No Love, Money gang members. Jimenez allowed those in the gang to drive the Hummer, nicknamed the Tank, according to sources who say reports of shots fired were often linked to a vehicle matching its description. Jimenez paid the traveling vice lords thousands of dollars each to flip gangs, call themselves traveling royals, and make him feel like the mayor of Gotham City. But the alliance between the Simon City Royals and the traveling vice lords from 700 North Trumbull did not stop the Royals' racist activity. Earlier in 2014, a black couple walking from their car to their home, with their 2-year-old child and their groceries, were accosted by members of Jimenez's crew on the northwest side. According to a police report, they flashed a gun, called the couple monkeys, and said, "Get the F out of our hood, we will effing kill you." One of Royals, Luis Candelaria, was convicted of a hate crime and sent to prison. Police think that the No Love, Money gang first targeted the conservative vice lords on July 3, 2014. Witnesses saw a green Hummer right before a shooting in the 600 block of North Ridgeway, sources say. Martin Satterfield, a former Marshall High School basketball player, was left partially paralyzed. He now uses a wheelchair. Satterfield, whose family says wasn't a gang member, wouldn't cooperate with investigators, according to a police report. Before Satterfield was shot, the neighborhood was relatively quiet, police records show. Afterward, a back and forth gun battle raged in the approximately 16-block area on the west side of Chicago. Jimenez called himself Batman, bought himself 2 houses, 2 Lamborghinis, a Bentley convertible, and the Joker paid gangsters to hang with him, but in real life, his fantasy world left 19 people shot and 4 dead.
On September 30, 2014, Sean Dell Adams, 25, was fatally shot at about 3:30 a.m. in the 600 block of North Ridgeway, where Martin Satterfield was shot and paralyzed on July 14, 2014. Police suspect the No Love, Money gang was responsible. No charges have been filed in Adams' killing. DeMarcus Nelson, better known as Rambo, and another member of the No Love, Money gang, were shot and wounded at about 7 p.m. in the 3500 block of West Huron, just hours after Adams was killed. Police suspect they were targeted by the conservative vice lords in retaliation for Adams' death. Nelson was 20 at the time of the shooting. Less than a month later, on October 24, 2014, Owen Spears, 22, an aspiring rapper nicknamed Skino, was fatally shot in the 700 block of North Trumbull. Police believe Spears was a No Love, Money gang member, whose former gang, the Traveling Vice Lords, murdered him for disloyalty. Some core members of the No Love, Money gang, got the hint and left. Others stayed. Many of them went to jail, including 3 of Jimenez's top lieutenants. "Rest in peace, Oskino," Jimenez wrote in a 2015 jailhouse letter. "You're in my heart forever." On November 19, 2014, Tyrese Ferguson, 23, was killed, and 3 others were wounded when the Pontiac Grand Prix they were riding in was sprayed with bullets from a military-style rifle, in the 700 block of North St. Louis. They were believed to be members of the No Love, Money gang. Williams was arrested January 31, 2015, for having an illegal 9mm handgun, while riding in an SUV pulled over for a traffic violation. "Everybody trying to kill me because I'm a royal," officers said Williams told them. "I gotta protect myself." The same gun was used to shoot a Four Corner Hustlers member in the leg, earlier that month on the west side, authorities say. On February 5, 2015, DeMarcus Rambo Nelson, 20, was killed in the 4600 block of West Maple, in the Austin neighborhood, nearly 5 months after he was wounded in No Love, Money gang territory, in West Humboldt Park. 2 others were wounded. On March 22, 2015, while free on bail, Williams was driving a Chrysler 300 on the west side with No Love, Money gang members, when he got pulled over, after a chase, for running a stop sign. Officers said, a loaded AK-47 style rifle was in the car. Again, Cook County prosecutors charged Williams with illegal gun possession, and he was freed on $100,000 bail. On April 12, 2015, another Royals member, Tyrell Thomas, walked into a convenience store near Chicago and Holman Avenues, with a submachine gun tethered to his neck by a shoestring. It was a gun fit for a Hollywood action film, federal prosecutors later wrote. Thomas' two accomplices also were members of the Royals, after flipping from the traveling vice lords, according to police, who say the trio stole about $370 from rival gang members. A security camera showed them entering and exiting the store. Thomas was the only traveling Royal sent to prison for the crime. On August 13, 2015, Williams was shot in the forearm, but wouldn't cooperate with the police. Weeks later, federal authorities charged Williams with illegal possession of the 9mm handgun, and the rifle. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. In his sentencing memo, federal prosecutors noted that Cook County judges had released Williams on bail for gun possession, twice. Despite having been arrested in possession of an even more deadly weapon than his already pending charge, defendant was once again released on bond, prosecutors wrote. They said Williams' rap sheet included more than a dozen arrests for drug possession, and threatening people with guns, that he was given repeated chances to get his life back on track, but has instead chosen again and again to ally himself with violent street gangs. First, the traveling vice lords and, most recently, the Simon City Royals, led by Thaddeus Jimenez. 2 weeks after Williams' arrest, Jimenez jumped into his Batmobile, alongside his homie, Jose Roman, blasting Ave Maria through the speakers, while driving through his hood threatening people with a gun. It's a viral YouTube video culminating in Jimenez pulling up to Earl Castile and shooting him in the legs. An example to show that Jimenez's crew earned the name No Love, Money Gang, is the fact that a then 35-year-old Batman bought his then 22-year-old Robin, Jose Roman, a Range Rover to be his friend. Devontae Hall, identified as another member of the Royals, got locked up for a triple shooting in 2016. On March 7, 2016, he and an accomplice shot 2 men and a woman near 13th and Lawndale, police said. Witnesses said one of the gunmen yelled, "I told you I ain't playing." Devontae Hall was 20 years old at the time he was arrested for aggravated battery with a firearm. Now please, put some pressure on that like button, and subscribe to the Cartoon News Network, as we keep pushing towards 5,000 subscribers.
LBK, bitch, y'all better stop lacking. We out here, no poop button. The nicest cars y'all ever seen in your life. Oh no, bitch. Gucci Man don't need nothing car. Motherfucker drive himself. He's supposed to drive himself. I blast that you, bitch, personally. Oh no, bitch. No poop button. Top down. Chopper all day. Don't get no fuck.